Welcome to Rotten Cassava, guys, and today we'll be doing a recap on the first Nollywood movie ever produced, Fincho. The name of the village wasn't mentioned in this movie, but from the language they spoke, I'm pretty sure it was based in the western Nigeria. Actonu's village was far from civilization and they still live in their ancient ways, apart from the religion of the church. His only ambition was to get married to the love of his life and raise children with her. Her name was Maui. So one day, Maui asked him if he was really serious about her and if he had ambitions to end up with her. Actanu replied that he was ready to end up with her and that he only wanted to raise money to pay for their dowry. Maui then assured him that she would wait for him, and she understood with him that it was difficult to raise money in their village, considering the fact that there was no civilization in their village like civilization had hit the neighboring villages. Actanu decided to double his hustle by doubling what he was doing fishing, but he figured out that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get enough to save because after fishing, he would go back and feed his family and there was no money for him to keep for the dowry. He wished that their village had some natural resources that could attract white men over. But even if they had had these resources, the Juju man was always against the embracing of Western culture in their village. It wasn't long until they got a visit from a white man named Mr. Finch, and he ordered for the council of elders because he had seen something he was interested in. Mr. Finch explained that he was interested in felling their trees and he needed them to grant him permission to fell their trees and also to grant him labor. Actanu eavesdropped through the whole conversation. At the end of the meeting, the village chief granted Mr. Finch permission to fell the trees, but he didn't grant him permission to use any of his villagers for labor. But Actanu snuck back and went to Mr. Finch and volunteered to work for him for pay. Mr. Finch seemed excited enough and accepted his proposal. On getting his job, he explained everything that happened to Maui, but Maui was against it, since the chief priest and the Juju man has always told them that the ways of the Western world was against their ways. Actanu then explained that working for Mr. Finch was the fastest way to raise money to pay for her dowry. Soon she was convinced, and then she teased him that since he was going to work for Mr. Finch, she would then call him Fincho. Weeks after working for Mr. Finch, Fincho came back to his village, took Maui out and he shut down their local bar, and he also paid for drinks for everybody there. But their celebration was cut short by the Juju man, who explained that Fincho was disgracing their ways. But despite that, the villagers seemed impressed by the amount of money which Fincho had and he was willing to spend, so they were all convinced to join him to work at the mill. But one day, something happened. While at work, Fincho fell so sick that he collapsed and he had to be taken home by his work colleagues. Mr. Finch drove him home and explained to his family that he had suffered malaria. While he was being nursed by Maui, his fiancée, he looked out the window and then he noticed that the Juju man had been spying on him. Although Maui didn't see the Juju man, by the end she stated that the Juju man was trying to use his Juju to bring him down. But Mr. Finch's Juju was way stronger than the Juju man's own, and that she assured him that he would be fine soon. Just as he was assured, he was back to work stronger and better. Soon he was ready for his marriage introduction and he went to go and see Maui's parents in the presence of the Juju man. Despite the presence of the witch doctor, the negotiation went very well as he agreed to marry Maui for a dowry price of £50. Soon after, he was to go out to sea to deliver some timber for Mr. Finch, and he told Maui that in a month's time, he will be back to get married to her. But on arrival, he noticed something unusual. There were machines everywhere, and to add to it, the sawmill camp was empty. Finch had replaced the workers with machines. This was bad because now the villagers had no other source of livelihood. Furiously, he returned to Maui. He knew that the villagers would blame him for convincing them to work for Mr. Finch, so he had to take responsibility. He led a protest to Mr. Finch's house, and their demands was for Mr. Finch to rehire everybody that had been sacked. Finch refused, but still offered to rehire those who were willing to stay back and operate the machines. He also noted that Fincho wasn't fired initially, but Fincho refused to leave his group as he felt responsible for them being jobless by now. Filled with pride, Fincho went back home and vowed never to work at the sawmill again. But Maui had other plans. She went behind his back and visited Mr. Finch's wife and negotiated the return of her husband back to the sawmill. Her kind gesture granted her her request. She was then able to convince her husband to go back to work at the sawmill. Soon, Fincho was ready to swallow his pride, and he went back to work for Mr. Finch. This worked out well for him because he was soon promoted, and also Mr. Finch granted him the will to open his own sawmill. Lastly, everything worked out for them, and him and Maui had a baby girl, and the movie ended with them celebrating at the naming ceremony of their child. They named her Fumilayo. And so they lived happily ever after. So that concludes the recap of the movie Fincho, the first ever Nollywood movie ever produced. Remember guys, this movie was actually produced in 1957, hence the picture quality. But the question here is, has Nollywood improved from this movie the way it should have since then? But what I like most about this movie is that, minus the very simplistic storylines, they were able to show us some educative scenes. We got to see scenes from the sawmill, and in modern day Nollywood movies, we hardly see scenes like that. You might hardly see scenes of anything being done at all. Last time I saw scenes of production was in the movie Anikulapo, and I really give the director kudos for that. But in terms of picture quality, I think we've really improved a whole lot. The movie really showcased a lot of cultural display too. And lastly, the acting in the movie wasn't all that good. I mean, most of the stories were told via narration, but given the fact that it's a 1957 movie, I really think it was a pretty decent movie. That I will recommend anybody to go back and watch this movie, but it's important to know what this movie is about. I mean, it's all about our history too. So thank you guys for watching this video and for tuning into my channel. Remember to like, comment, share and subscribe.